Hello, wrestling friends. It's me, Matt Coon. That means, of course, we're listening to the Gentleman Villain podcast with the Lordship himself, the purveyor of the power of the punch,
Oh,
Mr. Regal. How are you doing today?
I'm wonderful. I've just had as we are talking, last weekend I spent in England, well, in the UK, England and Scotland, and it was a wonderful time. And I got to see my father for about 10 hours, which was the main reason I went on that trip, and which was wonderful. And then I got to have two incredibly magic days. Uh, I'm going to give a shout out to the people inside of the ropes here who organised some fantastic shows, and we had a great time. And the fans that came were great. Kenny McIntosh did a great job of interviewing me. It was the first time I've ever done. I've done loads of those kind of shows on my own with a gentleman called Chris Brooker, and there's a lot of great times that we had doing that. And then we did one in Blackpool right before COVID, when it was in January, which was the UK NXT. And I said, that's the last one of those I'm ever going to do. Everything begins and ends in Blackpool. And so that is actually on film, WWE film that. Obviously,
wow.
I'm not there at the moment,
Right.
but
it could pop up one day.
when I'm dead. When, when I'm dead, they can put that or if not, that footage is the show that we did in Blackpool at the beginning of 2000. I did an hour of telling stories, and then we did it was a weird Q&A. It ended up just one question set me off, as people on this
You don't
podcast have
say.
probably
I don't
figured
believe
out.
that. No
One
chance.
question took, it led on to one story, to another, to another, to another, to another, to another. And as far as I know, they were all interesting and making people laugh and whatever else. But we filled up another hour of that, and we filmed all kinds of things going on that day. And I said that was going to be the last of those that I ever did, because it couldn't have ended on a higher note. And I'm going to be honest here. This is 2019. 2020. We've gone a little bit into 2018. I had a bit of a strange year. I didn't know how long this was going to last.
Right.
And because of having a brain injury, 2 bleeds on the brain in 2018.
So you're talking more about your mental cognition, not your health.
Yes, and I wanted to. I was feeling great. I'd had all the heart surgery that I had in 2018 as well, and got through a lot of, like, 8 weeks of recovery in hospital and all kinds of stories. We've never even got into that on this show, but a lot of really strange stuff. And so I was back working from WrestleMania onwards of 2019. Came around to 2020. Everything was great, but it's still, it was very fresh in my mind. How long have I got left with this? And I want to leave it. If it's going to be anywhere, it's getting the last talk show that I do will be in Blackpool, and it couldn't have been more perfect. So this was a new kind of a format for me, where Kenny, you just 2 chairs on the table, and Kenny just asked me questions, and that led to a load of great stories, and me telling, okay, because that's it. I've got nothing but stories, thankfully, and I can remember most of them. Or if not, something will trigger, even if you ask, and we will get that'll happen today, and that's happened every single week we've done this.
Absolutely.
Something will trigger something else, and that's the problem. I've got too much in here, because 39 years of doing this comes with, and me being me, comes with a lot of stories, and hopefully people can learn from them and learn not what to do, and maybe a little bit what to do, and get on with each other and get on with the jobs or whatever else. And so I had a wonderful weekend there, and now we're back and just had a good week in Washington, D.C. And that's going to lead into this, because
Sure.
I had an old friend, and it felt like an old friend came back into my life this week.
The power of the punch, the brass knuckles. You had a face-to-face with MJF. He had the ring, and it's like the old Crocodile Dundee joke. You know, that's not a knife. This is a knife. And you showed him
with a ring. I mean, oh dear.
Well, you know, it's cool that it's very cool that it's a rare sight to see you get in the ring, you know, and act in that role. You know, you're acting the mentoring role, the commentator role, but everybody knows you can handle yourself. So, and they don't do it a lot. So when you do go in the ring,
you know, I've got a decent left hand, but as Al Capone once said, you know, because I'm very polite, a few kind words and a loaded gun will get you a lot more than a few kind words. And so I'm quite happy to, you know, why waste my knuckles at my age on anybody? You know, I've had, my hands are all broken up from lots of things in this world. And it was
it's just self-preservation at this point.
So, yeah, you know, and the thing was, this is another thing, and MJF needs to learn this. There's a difference between thinking you're a bad guy and being a real one. When in the early 2000s, if any of you can remember that, when I started using, in England we call them Knuckle Dusters. So brass knuckles, but Knuckle Dusters. When I started using those, like I say, I've got a good left hand and I can use it very well. But I didn't need it. I just did it because I wanted to. That's the difference between a real good guy and a bad. You know, what's different levels of being a bad guy?
Right.
I just did it because I wanted to. I know I could knock you out with my left hand if I wanted to, but I'd rather do it a lot more viciously and know that you're going to not ever forget me, because you're going to have back to the beginning of the Blackpool Combat Club and all that stuff.
Yeah.
I'm going to leave my mark on you, and you're going to remember me for the rest of your life, because every time you bite down on something, you feel your jaw, because I've give you a crack in the mouth and giving you a crack with my fist, one thing, giving you a crack with a pair of knuckle dusters on is a completely other thing. Poor Edge. Poor Edge. I mean, he has, and he won't mind me saying this, he has rather a prominent chin anyway. And it's a good job he did, because I've cracked him more than anybody with those when I used to, was it 2001, when I started using those. So, yeah. So, ask away.
Well, I want to talk real quick about what happened with MJF. MJF,
yes.
You know, had beaten Wheeler Yuta in a great match. And
yes.
MJF seems to be a guy who is a student of the game. Of course, he doesn't want people to cheer him. He wants people to boo him. He's very good at it.
Yep.
What does the Blackpool Combat Club, and of course, MJF is headed to a head-to-head with John Moxley. But what does the Blackpool Combat Club think of MJF generally as a wrestler, as a competitor?
Well, I'm not sure about the others. I'm very impressed with him. And I've known him since he was a teenager. And for a lot of reasons, we didn't see each other. And 2018 being one of them. He
auditioned for Tough Enough, right? Is that?
I don't know about that. Okay. I don't know about that. He came into my world because of Matt Striker. I get on very well with Matt, and Matt had suggested.
Matt is also a lover of music, like you are.
Yes,
Matt loves music very much, like you do. Yeah.
Matt had suggested I take an interest in MJF, and I met him, and we spent some time together and tried to give him a bit of guidance, and then we didn't. He's got a different story to tell on why we didn't. I have a very different story to tell. I'm not going to tell that story now. I spotted a lot of promise in him, and a lot of I just saw it then. And that's one of the things that has got me through this somehow. I seem to be able to spot things in people before anybody else. I wouldn't say anybody else does, but and certain people, every talent is different. When I was doing my old job of being a talent scout, every talent is different. And when you meet certain people, you know that they've got talent, but there's also things that they need to do, which is, in my opinion, the best thing you can do as a young wrestler is to go out and wrestle everywhere you can. And hopefully you figure out what it is you need, because life, just time and life makes and experiences makes you either stay in this and figure it out or not. And there's another reason why I'm doing this. There's a lot of things I'm trying to leave out here for anybody who wants to finally slice down the actual nuggets of what not to do. I can save you a lot of time on not what to do, but sometimes you need to find out what not to do yourself. Me telling you is one thing. You having bad experiences working for different people, different promotions, or just traveling up and down the roads. It's not always bad experience. It's all experience.
Right. Not all bad experiences are bad experiences.
Bad experiences. If you one of the first episodes of this podcast we did was talking about having an open mind and what can I take from this, right? You can look at life like, oh, this is no good, this is rotten, or you can go, right, what can I take from this? How can I make it work for me? And myself and MJF had some interaction, and I kept in touch. I told him to keep in touch with me. But after a while, it was okay. He has a different thing, and this is his story. But I knew he was going to be fine. But he was young, far too young to get hired. Or there's only so many places that ever were at NXT. Right. And if you've got a full roster and somebody young, you like, right now what you need to do is to go out and do your thing and make people notice you, which he did, but we also got, there's a year of me not being around that a lot of people didn't know about. And since I first did Chris Jericho's podcast in March, people found out why I wasn't. Well, a lot of people didn't even know I was not there, but I wasn't around. And he just became one of the people, along with a few others, Sammy Guevara and Ricky Starks, and people that just went out of my world. And when I came back into the world in 2019, things had moved on, and I'm sorting a lot of things out. And then I hear they're all going to other places. So it was like, job done as far as I'm concerned. It's not about getting them hired anyway. It's about them getting on in wrestling. So I've always seen the potential in him. Not sure I like some of the ways he goes about doing stuff, because it's back to that being, if you want to be a real bad guy, there's things that you can do and things that you can't. And I used this term on AEW the other week. It's only a few people I know this term, but ODV, which is an ordinary decent villain, right? that means anybody who signs up to be a pro wrestler, you're fair game for anything that my wicked mind wants to do to you.
Right. But if you don't,
you leave them alone. And I will tell this story. This is a reality. I got on very, very well with Roddy Piper because we sort of understood each other. We're both young people when we got in this, and we had to go through a lot of different things than people go through. And we got on very well. I would never, there was a point when John Moxley was, and I believe it might have been before he even debuted on the main roster, but we were at a WrestleMania, and I was stood talking to Roddy Piper, and John Moxley walked by, and I said, Roddy, can I introduce you to this friend of mine, please? I said, he's like us. He's different, and he thinks differently, and he acts differently, and he's grown up, different. He's not some lad who's grown up in a middle class background and then wants to act like a bad guy. He's had to fight to get through life. And I introduced them, and they got on for that one meeting. As far as I know, it was the only meeting. I left them two to have a conversation, and Roddy Piper to pass on anything he wanted to pass on to John Moxley. I would never have done that with MJF. I might have said hello. If I was there and MJF came over, I might have said, Roddy, this is MJF, but I wouldn't have said, can you impart your wisdom on him? Because Roddy Piper would have seen straight through him. He would have gone, this is a lad that's not grown up the same as us and not got the same kind of mentality. And not got the same, you might think you're a bad guy, or you might want to act like a bad guy, but there's a difference. There's a big difference, and very few people know that difference. There's a lot of people got through this job by just acting like a bad guy because they're in pro wrestling. And then there's people, and it doesn't mean you're a bad person. It's just that you'll go to a different length. You'll go to a different length to take things to a different level if you have to. Well, there's my feeling. I'm a huge fan of what MJF has accomplished, but he's still not on that level of being he can act like a bad guy and he can do all kinds of horrible things, but how far is he willing to take that? Well, he's going to have to take that and face John Moxley. And John Moxley is in it. I know that's
a different kind of meeting altogether.
Right.
The meeting between MJF and John Moxley.
Right. And right. John Moxley, people cheer him and they love him. And now he's settled down, and he's a bit like me, right? But me and him get on because we know that we're rogues. And these are not all words that are just play out words with different kind of a way of outlook, or different things that we'll go to do to people, or if you mess with their families, or you can talk about what you would do, and there's what you would do. And that's, I don't know if this is going to make any sense to anybody, but there's a big difference in being a real nasty person, if you have to be, and how far you will take it, or just doing it because you think it's good to go out and do a load of catchphrases and say, get people to boo you by saying things about their sports teams. He's going to have to step up big time if he wants to get in the ring with somebody like John Moxley. And if he does, good for him. And if he survives all that, and then he's going to be either better for it, and he might be even get more horrible for it. I don't know, but he's he's 26. Well, he's got to start whatever he's got away with up to now. He's got to start playing with grown-ups, grown-up nasty people who will proper take you to places that you might not want to go to. So if he's good enough and he gets through all this, good for him. But I still don't think it'll make his upbringing hasn't. I don't care what he's gone through. He hasn't gone through what we've had to go through.
Well, first of all, that's fantastic because when we all saw Dean Ambrose for the first time on the main roster, the person that he was compared to the most was Roddy Piper. So what a great story, you know. And I'm going to transition with this because it's not a hard transition to make. People that grew up hard, people that grew up a little tough, one might say I did as well, had to learn how to make choices, had to learn how to maybe let their ethics kind of flow a little bit when they're younger, and that makes for a good bad guy. And a good bad guy who uses foreign objects like brass knuckles. We talked earlier, and I remember Ric Flair being a wrestler that I hated when I was a kid because he didn't have to cheat to win. He was good. He didn't have to cheat,
didn't, and
but he did.
But you did just because you can.
And that's the psychology of the brass knuckles with you, was that everyone knew you had this credibility, everybody knew you had this background, but now you're just a bad guy who just wants to win matches as easily as you can. Is that the psychology behind the brass knuckles?
Just to do a lot of damage, and because I could, and I can leave a mark on people. Yes.
Now you mentioned Edge. Edge in the Royal Rumble 2002. So just, you said 2001, but it's right on the cusp of 2002. You fought Edge to win the Intercontinental title, and I believe that's the first time that we use the term the power of the punch.
Yes.
You use those brass knuckles. Let's talk a little bit about how did we come up with the idea of that being your thing now, and also the idea to call it the power of the punch. What do you remember about any of that?
Okay, so let's go back. The idea of me actually using it. So now we've talked about there was a reality to this that is something. How the idea came along, and this is there's a gentleman in England called Dave Courtney. Dave was a rogue, and he's made a living out of being a rogue in and writing a lot of books and some really entertaining books about his life being a rogue. And I've wrote this in my book that came out in 2005. I've never hidden away from that. Dave Courtney's first book was called Stop the Ride, I Want to Get Off. And it was because he'd had enough of being in this world that he was in. And it's actually, there's a nice time with a wrestling tie in here. My friend Lars from the band Rancid, they have a song called David Courtney.
Oh, wow.
And the story, I've never met Dave Courtney. I know certain people that I know that have, but I've never met him. But the story that Lars told me was Lars was getting beaten up on somewhere in LA, and it might have been, I forget where. I think again, this is Lars's story, but he'd been attacked because Lars is a punk, and he has covered in tattoos and that, and he was getting, and Dave Courtney just happened to be in LA and driving past or getting driven past and saw this fella getting beaten up, jumped out the car and saved Lars from a good kicking. And so, and then Dave's got his own stories, right? And I don't know if that's 100% right, but that's what I remember Lars telling me why
Huge
Rancid had
wrestling
done
fan,
a song.
Lars Fredrickson
Yes.
from Rancid, huge wrestling fan, yeah.
And me and him get on wonderfully. He's a great fella. CM Punk introduced us, I don't know, 15 years or 14 years ago or something. And they're close friends. And I've always got on with Lars ever since. Me and him, like a lot of the same youth culture thing, music, jokes. He spent a lot of time in England. He has a very British sense of humour. And of people of our age, we get on well. Let's put it that way. We've always got on well. Well, I'd lent this book to Triple H, and Dave was quite open about the fact that he wasn't the best fighter in the world, but he cheated a lot because he used to wear knuckle dusters, right? Brass knuckles. And I'd lent this book because it's a really, really, great entertaining book. And with a lot of stories that are, if you're into that kind of true crime stuff, there's some very entertaining and funny stories in it. Triple H said to me one day after reading this book, he enjoyed the book, and then he went, "Do you know, you should start using the knuckle dusters." And so I was like, okay. And that's how it started. It was just one mention of it, but it was also right at the same time, and we've talked about this before, where I was taken out of the role of commissioner, and I was going into this, or at the time that I was about to transition from the role of the commissioner into going into a program with Edge. And I needed the spiteful. There's obviously there was. Have I ever told the story of the Vince McMahon Kiss My Ass Club?
Not yet.
Not yet. Well, this is as good a time as any.
Let's go for it.
This is as good a time as any, so it's out of the way. Because people always ask me this question.
You know what people want to know.
Yeah,
I know it's kind of, it's a fan question, right? But
right.
It's like, how could you do that? How could you subject yourself to that?
Right.
Isn't Vince a terrible person?
No.
Aren't you, these are the stuff we hear from
this
fans
is
about it.
Let's do this story now, because this is perfect timing, because this all leads in to the power of the punch. I get a message one day to go and see Mr. McMahon. Mr. McMahon said, right, we're going to finish this commissioner role. And for about 10 seconds, I'm thinking, oh, this is a great role I'm in. And he always seemed to know, everybody's got a Mr. McMahon story. I have nothing but, when I worked for him, I have nothing but incredible. If we can, there's so many topics. My handshake deal with Mr. McMahon when I started in 2000, well, when I went back in 2000, when I've got a good role for you, you'll be in it. And when I don't, you'll be working on live events and you'll be busy. So, and that was all I ever did. If you go back, and there's one role after another of really memorable roles, the commissioner, the Tajiri stuff, the Eugene stuff, the even short little things with the pirate, with Paul Burchill, if you put all that stuff together, all those backstage things and all those, I had incredible, and that's why people from that time period, it's not my wrestling that people remember. It's me being put in incredible, and we've talked about Brian Gewirtz giving me incredible like opportunities to do all this character stuff. And that's what makes people remember. And people remember me for different bits. Why? How? Like last week, I was talking to two shows, and I said, look, most people here will only know me for a little bit of whatever they seen in me. They haven't got the. If you're 25, how have you got the time frame to? I was, you know, I've been in America for 30 years. You've only got so much time in your world to watch wrestling. You might just and people of 20 in the 20s might only know me from just being the last few months on AEW. I understand that. I don't think that people are going to know I'm just a normal journeyman wrestler that just happened to have a long career and have lots of incredible things happen, but incredible roles, and that they're memorable to the people who remember them.
Right, it's the presentation at the time.
It's a presentation, right? Well, I've been in this commissioner role, and it was great because I got to do incredible things and a lot of live event, not pay-per-view things, but I was never. We've talked about this. I didn't care about being. By the time I got to WWE, I know everybody should want to be world champion. I'm a career wrestler. I don't care about what other people are doing. I was quite happy doing whatever I needed to do because I've lived a good life of wrestling, and I know if you're the world champion, whereas I was working 180 days a year, they're working 500 days a year and working 30 hours a day. And I didn't want that. I didn't want that pressure. I didn't need that pressure. If somebody would have said, right, you could be world champ, yeah, but I hope maybe just for a month or something, because I don't want to do that.
Just a taste. That's good. That's good.
Right. But it never really bothered. It never bothered me. Right. Because I've done again, from the people I was taught to be a pro and just do my job, and all the rest of the stuff it's ego, and I don't really have that. I don't have that. I'm not competitive. I don't have the ego. I just wanted to do it. So when you get told from the boss, you're going to be in a good role when I've got it. Well, my first day when I started back, it actually ended up being cut because it was on a SmackDown. The first thing that I ever did in 2000 when I came in September was sat at a table in the ring doing the Goodwill Ambassador and Chris Jericho came down. We actually did it on the SmackDown. We ended up doing, I could have this wrong, but it got cut. And we didn't do it. We did it again the next TV show. And so that's when the first time I was on TV. In the afternoon of the first time we did it, nobody else knew what was going. There was writers that were telling me, they just said, right, have you got a suit? Yep. Obviously I've got a suit. Some people were telling me one thing, some people were telling me the other. I got called to Mr. McMahon's office and they said, right, you're gonna be, this is on the afternoon of the first time I'm debuting. He said, you're gonna be the Goodwill Ambassador, and you've got to go out there and really believe that you are helping people, not doing the anti-American stuff that I'd done for all my American career in WCW. Well, not all of it, but the majority of it in WCW. So he had an idea of what he wanted out of this character, and that morphed into me being the GM, and that had a good run. And then so one day I get called into Mr. McMahon's office, and when I was in this role of Goodwill Ambassador and the GM, if you ever want to go back and look at the live events, I was in a lot of main event stuff and 6-man tags and all kinds of stuff with all the top stars because I was the authority figure or whatever I was. And I got to do a lot of things and I was happy with that, right? And I was getting good paychecks and whatever without having the stress of having to be the top person, but still being involved with top people. There's stuff with me wrestling Steve Austin and wrestling Chris Jericho and wrestling The Rock and all kinds of stuff in that period of time, in that first period of time. So I get this call to go and talk to Mr. McMahon, and Mr. McMahon said, right, we want to take you out of this role. And so I'm thinking, oh, well, that's a good role. And then within a second of him finishing his thing and me his sentence about taking me out of this, and me thinking, oh, well, this is going well. He said to me, always finish something where at its peak, so you don't ever want it to trickle out.
Right.
That's what, and he see, everybody has these different things with everything with my career that I was around. When I was involved in something, if ever I needed any guidance, I could just go to him and he'd go, yes, this is what and after a while, this is what I need. I understood, boom. And we've talked little bits about that. I had a lot of trust with him because I'd done a lot of talking and I could always do whatever, and I could react and do whatever I needed. And I somehow pulled off all this stuff, these roles and all these backstage things. And I did a lot of stuff with him. So you just build up trust. So he said, I want to take you out of this. He said, never let anything go past its peak, because if we stop it now, we can always go back to that. How many times did I go back to doing something like that in my career? A lot.
You did. Yeah, definitely.
Right. And it never ran its course.
Because you saved the headroom and you left them wanting more every time.
Right. And I don't think, again, I don't not put myself in Elvis's thing, but that's why Elvis never did this is Mr. McMahon's idea of my character. Not how can I say this without, it's nothing to do with Elvis, but Elvis's manager never let him do an encore. Right? There's that saying, Elvis has left the building. Right? Always wanting more. Well, I'm nothing. I'm nobody. But Mr. McMahon had the sense to know that when to use me and when not to use me. And he had an idea of where he wanted me. And other people have ideas of what they think I should have been. I would much prefer for people to wonder why I wasn't world champion than why I was. Because I could have been a complete failure as a world champion. Right? Because some people have been. Right? So
yeah.
I'd rather just people wonder why I wasn't. And some people do say that to me. You should have been this. No. You keep wondering why. Because that keeps the myth alive. Whatever myth that you think of me. That's I do hear that, right? People say, "Oh, you're one of the."
I was going to say it's definitely a better legacy to be like, you should have been world champion.
Should have been world
take
champion.
Take a chance on a world championship that people didn't like, right?
And then go, oh, you were rotten, and the houses were down. It's another thing when you're world champion. I've seen a lot of people crack under that because all of a sudden, everybody in those days, you got paid off the houses. Pay scale's different. When people get in that role, and all of a sudden, if you've got Steve Austin to live up to, or The Rock, or Triple H, or The Undertaker, and you're not at, quite their level, and the houses go down, and all of a sudden, I never, ever, I was always appreciative of whoever was in that spot, and never once did it ever cross my mind if my check wasn't as big. Because I understand this job. This is Samoa Joe phrased this the best I've ever heard once. He said, there's a lot of people, we're in show business, but there's too many people about the show and not about the business. Well, I've always thought like that. I'd never heard it put like that before. I mean, it's a great way of thinking. I was always about the business. I understood that not everybody can be selling buildings out. So, but you find a lot of people around you, or a lot of the talent, then the knives come out and they all think they can be world champion and they all think they can draw and they cannot. It's very difficult to stay in that position and the pressure that gets put on you. And I won't mention names, but I've known a lot of people and I've had to talk, because I'm whatever I am, I've been their confidant at times when they've things are happening because they've realized people are not treated. Then, I was just one of the lads or one of the boys, as they say over here. And now people aren't the same with me. It's because there's the jealousy, there's whatever. The jealousy creeps in, or hang on, I'm not getting as much money every week. and then they blame the world champion. These things all used to go on, right? I don't know if they still go on now, because I'm not talent anymore. Well, I'm talent, but I'm not in that league of talent.
Right.
And the pay scale's different. And it was about drawing on all being in pay-per-views and that. And I just accepted whatever was given. I made it work. So Mr. McMahon said, this is the way to get out. We need to get out of this. And so I was like, okay. He said, because don't ever pass its peak. And I know when to take, you know, this is it. And he said, and the reason I want to get you out of this, he said, we can go back to it at any time, which I did a lot of times. He said, I want you to wrestle this lad Edge. He said, he's been in this tag team and we have high hopes for him as a singles wrestler, but he needs to look like he can take a beating because he's been doing this more entertaining tag team with Christian. So I knew my role then. He laid out my role for me. He said, I need you to go to just make him look like he can take a beating. Okay, totally understand that. I understand that. A lot of people are not from a time. Again, it's different times and different periods of time. There's certain times when people had to do that to me, you know, to make me as a younger talent to have matches, and where you've got to elevate the perception of a certain person. You have to do certain things to get them so that the audience thinks of them in a different way.
Right.
And that can come in many, many forms. But we want this fella to look like he can go for a beating. Now, if you actually look at this, it started with me. Edge's run started with me, and I believe it went to Kurt Angle, and then it just went on and on, because Kurt's higher level, far higher level than I ever was. Kurt, and then whoever, and I think Edge did pretty good. Had a good run as a singles wrestler, right?
Yeah, saw him wrestle last night.
Right. So it was a laid out plan for me. So I said, okay. And the only thing I said was, and I forget whether it was to Mr. McMahon or to the writers or whoever it was, and these things I can't remember. But I said, I need a reason now to go from this half comical, sometimes like diabolical character as this GM, you know, goodwill ambassador GM kind of thing. There was more of an entertaining side to this. I need a reason to be very, very spiteful and horrible again, and be a nasty villain. And I said, the best way you can possibly do this is to humiliate me somehow. I need to be humiliated. And the reason I know that, because you will, again, these are all things that I've learned over time. If you get humiliated in front of people, in front of a group of people, or how, I'm going to ask you personally, Matt, and everybody's different, but it's like it's the worst feeling, right? If you do, right, and you want to, I don't know about you, but you want to lash out.
Yeah, absolutely.
You want to lash out.
Even if somebody's laughing in the background, you want to lash out at them. You want to lash out at everybody.
Right. You want to lash out. Right. And you either, if you do, you probably get locked up nowadays, but you want to, and whether it's like, there's nothing worse than being humiliated. I don't think, anyway, in front of people. And I've had some great things happen to me. There's one story that's not wrestling related at all, but I like to tell this story because it's weird. I've always sort of kept my head down when it comes to outside of wrestling. I'm quiet when I'm not doing wrestling. I'm quiet and polite. I don't. You never see me out with wrestling shirts on. I tried, because again, I come from a different time, and I know it's different now, but I was taught we've said it so many times about protecting the strength of this job. And I don't consider myself a phony pro wrestler.
Right.
Right.
And you talked about like not wanting to even talk to your neighbors much because you don't want to reveal more
so
about yourself.
I try to keep I just keep my head down. You know what I mean? I just, if anybody asked me, we've said it on this, I'd say some stupid thing to him just to deflect that. I'm not going to tell you. If you don't know I'm a wrestler, I'm not going to tell you. So this is right before I moved to America. I got home from Germany. I think it was December the 23rd of 1992. And I wasn't leaving because of visa issues. I should have gone to America at the beginning of January, but the visa was held up and I didn't finally go until January the 23rd of 1993 is when I moved to America, came to WCW. Well, in that time, I had a month with my family, which was lovely, over Christmas and into the New Year. And one of the last nights that I had, before I came to America, me and my wife went to the cinema. And as we left, we stopped to go to there didn't used to be many late night. There wasn't restaurants open or whatever. And we just stopped to get some food from a takeaway place to go home. And I walked into this, it was a kebab shop on Talbot Road in Blackpool. And I walked in and I just walk up to the counter and I hear a lot of giggling. On the side, there's like benches while people are waiting for their food. And I look over and there was a group of like young ladies or like my age kind of thing. This sounds a bit weird saying this, but when I was 17, 18, if ever I wrestled in Blackpool, there used to be a group of fans that used to come to see me. There was a group of young ladies that all were fans of mine. Well, that was when I was a teenager. I hadn't, and I was just polite to them occasionally, signed the odd autograph. That was years ago. It was several years ago, right? Because I was it's probably 8 years ago or something. I hadn't seen any because I've been off traveling the world and doing all these other things. And it was these ladies, and they were all like, "Oh, hello, Steve." When I used to be Steve Regal, "Are you still wrestling?" And I'm like, "Hello." So I'm ordering the food. I've ordered my wife's food, and my wife's in the car outside. And they said, "Are you still wrestling?" I said, "Yeah, I'm still wrestling." And where you been? We haven't seen you. Well, and I didn't want to say anything. I'm just trying to whisper because there's other people in there, but they're like all asking me wrestling questions, and I'm like, "Oh, well, I'm just come back from Germany. I've been there for a while and I'm about to go to America." "Oh, that's good. That's good." And they've all grown up, obviously. I don't know. They could all be married. I don't know. It was a long, different time. So I don't know what they've been doing with their lives for the last 8 years. I haven't seen it. Whatever it is, I haven't seen. "Oh, you're doing this, you're doing that." Yeah. So they're going, "Oh, it's nice to see you." I said, "Nice to see you, ladies." And I've took the food. The guys handed me the food, right? And I've took one step to go towards the door. And I didn't see, but there was a piece of lettuce was on this floor. And somehow I've turned and put my foot on this lettuce and then just slid and done the splits. And absolutely creamed myself. I've split my trousers, and I'm just going, and they've just gone, "Ooh, and they're just laughing. So the food's gone all over the floor, and I'm obviously not want to lash out at them, but just just humiliated to death. And I've got. And I've got up like that. And I've pulled both my hamstrings, like the inside of me abductors or whatever it is. And I've creamed, I've split my trap. And they just everybody in the place, not only them, everybody in the place, the fella behind the counter, they're just laughing their heads off at me. And I just want to like run somebody through the door, right? I just want to kill somebody.
Right.
But you can't, right? But I'm proper creamed. I'm going, and I limped out, like just barely got into the car. My wife said, "Where's the food?" I went, "Oh, we'll have to go." I didn't want to tell her, right? I just made a fool of myself. I said, "Oh, we've got to go and get to," and we slowly went somewhere else, and I like sort of held it together and got the food. So it was just little things like that I know that humiliation is the rage, and whatever else comes out of it is always a tool. Later in my wrestling career, I used to use that in my act, and I've obviously done it on TV a lot of times, but I would do it on a lot of live events. And I'm not going to give my tricks away, but I would purposely make like if I was wrestling a good guy of some type, if it was say first match where it's more of an entertaining match to set the night off, right, I would do something and do whatever and make fall on my backside, basically,
like slip on a banana peel type.
Yeah,
stuff,
slip on a banana peel, mate, and then get up and like throw a tantrum, and all the people are laughing at me, and then I would have my opponent just throw me all over the ring from one side to the other, and then I'd be people would be getting, then they'd get all excited, and then I would eventually cheat to cut that person off, to stop their momentum, and then I would go into from making a complete fool of myself into serious mode, and I would start pounding the life out of my opponent, right?
A very believable rage as a result.
A believable rage, and even to the
exactly
point
what you're talking about with
right,
same thing,
right, believable rage, and even looking at like somebody on the third row, this is your fault. And I wished it was you, and I wished it was you up there, and I wished it was you. You were just laughing at me. Well, unfortunately, I can't hit you, but I'm going to hit him. And I would just be pounding, and I'd just be pounding. And then the booze would come. And that's knowing how to get real heat. People, there's very few people that you can get cheap heat by saying things. Knowing how to get real heat as a villain is a very different thing. Very few people know that, and some people I could teach them a lot of things, but I'm not going to give them away on air. You need to earn a certain whatever and find me. And if I think you got all the right things going for you, or you're somebody who puts the time in, I can teach you a bag of tricks that can make people really not like you. And the difference of just pretending to be or having people not really like you, right? And that's there's many ways of doing that, but I have my own set, and I could just walk out and get people to hate me, truly hate me, and it's a skill set. So with that all being said, I'd said to either Mr. McMahon and whoever was there and the writers, I need to get out of this commissioner role to go into this serious role that I've got to do with Edge. I need something to humiliate me. I left it with them. And the idea that I was brought to, and somebody came to me and said, we've got this idea of this thing where Mr. McMahon does this thing where you have to kiss his backside. And I went, yeah. And they said, oh, because I think they were expecting me to say no. I said, yeah.
Yeah, they were getting ready to sell you on it. And
sell me on it. No, yeah.
You were already there.
Perfect. Yeah. I said, perfect. Because I knew straight away how much I could get out of that. There's not, you're right. I needed something to humiliate myself. I'm going to backtrack here because I did this thing that gets brought up about me doing this. Not one person ever mentions, which I'd done a lot previously to this, that I used to bury my head right inside Rikishi's backside. Right. And I mean, I used to go for it to the point of you know, we were both pros. We both understood how to get, you know, I know how to get Eaton, and I'm not frightened of getting it. You know, and there's clips of me doing that, but we used to do it on live events. I mean, I if he was going to do it, I committed to it. I would never not commit to anything. I would like hold my breath, like, and I've got good lung power. I could, and he could do that for a minute, right? And the longer he did it, the more the crowd reacted.
Oh, they loved it. Yeah,
that's my job. My job is to get crowd reactions. Rikishi's job is to get over as you know, his thing, and get his crowd. And I'm willing to do it. You see some people who don't want to do it. I would bet just like, that's my job. And the only, like, sometimes I would have to like squeeze him because I'd run out of breath. But I know there's times that me and him have done that, and it's gone well over a minute. And probably nearly 2, because I could hold my breath really well.
You got a signal for I want to breathe now.
Well, it was just me either pushing him or just like I can't. Or I'd have to sometimes, because he would. The more he did it, I can hear the crowd, and the more the crowd came. And that's my job as a villain. It's my job to get reactions and to get people not to like me and to get people to love him. And that's one of his things. So it's like a weird thing. Nobody ever mentions that, but they mention this thing with Mr. McMahon. But I needed so they explained this to me, and it was just on an afternoon. I'm not sure if I've got this right, but I think it was in Charlotte. And the reason I'm thinking it was in Charlotte is because Bobby Eaton came. And again, I could have these days mixed up. So somebody, whatever that is, this may be completely wrong. Bobby Eaton came in, and it was lovely to see him. And I think it was that same night. I don't know why I think that, but and Steve Austin was really happy to see Bobby, and Steve Austin got Bobby hired that night as a trainer. He went to Vince and said, you know, this is just him telling me later. He said, I've just gone and talked to the boss,
Charlotte,
about
same night. Yep.
Okay.
You're correct.
So yes. I'm glad that my brain's not that gone yet. That's good.
Always nice. Always nice to remember something, right?
It really is. So really is. Bobby Eaton was there. Right. So we get to the point where we're going to do this. Now, the thing was, Mr. McMahon, I wasn't supposed to actually kiss his backside. That wasn't what was laid out. What was laid out was he was going to get me to where I was going to do it, and then go, you know, like, not do it, and then fire me, or whatever the outcome of that was.
The point was to humiliate you enough where you were willing to do it.
Yes, willing to do it. That was and I've got no reason to lie about this. As we were, I kept saying to him, no, I'm going to do it. I know what kind of heat I can get off this, and I've got to have a real reason to be completely humiliated. I don't care. See, when you're comfortable with yourself and you've got nothing to prove, we've talked about this before, you're not playing at being a bad guy. I've got nothing to prove. I don't think I'm anything. I don't think I'm tough. I know other people say things about me. I don't think I am, but I'm very comfortable with myself. I've lived a lot of life before this point, you know. I've been through a lot of things, and I know I'm playing a character. I'm playing something that isn't me. That character gets left at Atlanta Airport, and I come home and I'm just me, right? And we've gone through all that before. I'm playing a character. I'm a character villain, or I'm a wrestler, or whatever you need me to be. But once I came to America, I became a character villain. For most of my career, occasional matches that I would have that were just serious wrestling matches. The rest of it, I was a character, and sometimes a mixture of both, whatever it is. And I'm very comfortable with myself. I've got nothing to prove to anybody, right? So I remember him going. We were arguing before. I forget who went out first, me or him. We were backstage at Gorilla, and he's going, You're not going to do it. I said, I am. He said, no, you're not. I said, I'm going to do it. He said, no, you're not going to do it. I said, I'm going to do it. He said, well, no, I don't want you to. I said, I'm doing it, right? And then either one of us had to go through the curtain. And then we did all that. And none of it was, we hadn't planned any. We just said we'll react to each other. So the whole thing was just me and him just reacting. We had such good chemistry. I let him do him. I did me. And we just went at it, right? And we did our thing. And there was no, apart from the actual scenario, there was no thought of any kind apart from trying to get, we knew we'd make this work. But he was saying like, no, you're not going to. I said, I'm going to do it. And he's going, I'm going to. I don't care what people think. I want them to, I've got to have that humiliation. This is the best way to do it. If you actually watch what I do, I just peck him basically on the hip. It is nowhere near his actual backside.
Right.
I just it's a little peck on the top, on his hip, right? Again, nobody ever brings up the fact that I was quite willing to stick my head right in Rikishi's backside and do it, right? I would do that because I understand my character. And there's all these like wannabe egomaniac tough guys who wouldn't do it. I would do it because I knew that worked. And I knew it got me over, and it certainly got Rikishi over. Well, I knew this was going to give me a great reason to carry on, to be this spiteful, horrible man that I needed to be, to go out there with edge, to take it from whatever to being a vicious fighter again, because I hadn't done that yet at this point in WWE. So that's the actual story to that. If you watch that show to the end, Taz, who was Killer Taz at the time, as I leave that scenario and leave the ring, he says something to me and I smash the life out of him. I come out and he calls me an ass kisser, and I smash the life out of him. And then I think, if I'm right, we end up having a match, and I beat him in about 30 seconds and just like go from whatever I was doing before to this raging, just smashing the life out of him and beat him. And a lot of people like just remember the one thing, they don't see the story. Well, from then onwards, I was a vicious spy. I had the reason, and for a while there was, and that didn't last long. It didn't last as long as I actually hoped it would. People, when I went out on live events, were chanting "ass kisser" and I was like, and then it'd get me even, instead of being comical about it, how I would have done a few months. Now I'm ready, and again, okay, you calling me that? Bang and bang to the person I'm on with, and to the point of where I'm just like not even looking at the person I'm on with, but I've beat them up so bad, just staring at the crowd and just kneeing them in the face and punching them and but still staring at all the crowd. Oh, you like that? Well, keep doing it because he's going to keep suffering for it. And then all of a sudden, again, these are all things that if you want to be a good bad guy, right. So then the next thing is this.
The power of the punch. And before we get to that, let's talk a little bit about someone who is nice enough to sponsor our podcast, and that is, of course, DraftKings. And the NFL opening week was action-packed, and it's just getting started. Get ready for a week of touchdowns, big plays, and even bigger wins with DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. This week, new customers can bet just $5 on any football game and get $200 in free bets instantly. Want more action? Everyone can experience the thrill of DraftKings early win promotion. It's simple. This Sunday, bet on any NFL team to win. If your team leads by 10 at any point during the game, you get paid instantly, even if your team loses. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use promo code REGAL to get $200 in free bets instantly when you place a $5 bet on any football game. That's code REGAL only at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Minimum age and eligibility restrictions apply. See show notes for details. Mr. Regal, we talked about how the Kiss My Ass Club
Yes,
related to
to
the Power
going
of the
into
Punch. We're going to talk a little
punch.
bit more about
Yeah,
Power of the Punch, but that segment. You say you were at the curtain. You were still undecided, kind of what was going to
yeah.
happen. Were you
Oh,
surprised
I
when?
wasn't undecided. I wasn't
What,
undecided. Mr. McMahon didn't want me
right.
to do it, and I did. I was determined I was gonna do it, and I did it.
Were you surprised when Vince pulled out the chapstick? That was
No, no. He had actually. We were backstage, and he said, "I'll pull this out at one point," and that I did know that little bit.
I would
Uh,
say it's probably your greatest, finest acting moment is, or at least one of them is the Kiss My Ass Club, because your facial expressions, it just, we got a bad guy already, but it just, and Vince is a bad guy, but for some reason the segment worked a million times because we wanted to see it, but we
yep,
didn't. But your facial expressions made it just hilarious and entertaining,
right,
which is what it's all about, really, right?
and that's another thing. If you'd have put the wrong person into that, that wouldn't have worked because they wouldn't have wanted to commit to it, or they wouldn't have wanted to do those kind of things. We've repeated myself a lot. Me coming into this job, all I ever wanted to be was a wrestler, a clown, or a comedian, and I've got to do all three. So I just look at it like I'm doing a comedy show, or I'm doing like you wouldn't question it twice. If William Regal was a character on a soap opera and he did that, you wouldn't question it twice. But for some reason, people, because I'm whatever I'm supposed to be as a wrestler, don't see the connection. We're telling stories, and William Regal is a character, and it played into the character perfectly. And any character I was given, I'd like to think I pulled it off, and I'm pulling off one now at the moment, which is really a bit of me and a bit of all kinds. But I've added the we go from the stuff that I do with Excalibur, where we've talked about that, where people don't know, can't quite take me, to the fact that I'll smash your
Right.
face in with a pair of brass knuckles and not think twice about it. And people will believe, and I know that people believe that I will do that, right? And it's all, I'm playing a character, and it's just there's so much of it now. I don't know where it comes from. It's
Right.
just over time. It's
And,
not
and it
just
makes the
playing
point.
one.
It makes the point that characters aren't one dimensional. Like
No.
with your character in AEW, like you said, you're borderline flirting with Excalibur and laughing along with that, and then at the same time you're this tough guy. People are complex. People are multidimensional, and I
Yes.
think it comes across as more credible when you have a 3D character or a 3D person that you're playing.
Yes, and that I don't have to think about it anymore. It just just boom, boom, boom. Younger talent have to try to find something and then build on it and build on it. Well, I've had, you know, a long time to just. At first, the first real character was Lord Stephen Regal, and it was trying to figure that out and adding there's all kinds of influences. But then it just became second nature. By 1996, that became second nature to me. And then from then on, anything, it took a few years to sort of find my voice. Although you can go back and watch the very early stuff that I did, it all worked because people didn't really know. But I've sort of found 96 was what I think was probably my best year, all told, because of finding my voice, the matches that I was having on Nitro and in WCW, the matches that I was having in Japan. I had, especially the second Hashimoto match. I wrestled in. I wish there was some footage of that. There's a match in Germany against Tony Sinclair doing 15. I think we did 15-round match there. There is a clip of me wrestling Robbie Brookside in Croydon in London that year. There's a little clip of it. I wish that would show up the matches, but that was like a really good. And once you find yourself, you can just keep adding to it, or going somewhere else with it, or going anywhere you want with it. It's just time and experience. A lot of things that I have that people don't have anymore, which is I feel very. I try to help as much as possible with people, but they're not wrestling 6 nights a week and finding out what works, what doesn't, and expected to just go on TV and come up with something. It's very difficult to do that. I couldn't have done that. It took me years to find that. It took, and anybody my age and older than me, if they say that they think it's easy for the young talent now, that they're just living in fairyland. No, we all had time. We all had to work in places, and if you couldn't keep up, you got fired. And so you had to come up with stuff, or you had to adapt, or you had to. But it takes a long time just to expect to become good. Like MGF is an example of whatever he did in a short period of time, he found something. Right, he's found his way of getting into that, and it's worked very well for him, and it was working. You know, he had something when I first met him. You know, when he was 19 or whatever. He was 19. So it was, there was something there, and he'd just work on it and go and work on it and go and make a name for yourself. And then all of a sudden, AEW come along and he got hired there. If he hadn't, I'd have probably hired it. Well, I know I would have hired him. If it's just that I wasn't. There was a lot going on, and he was already doing other stuff. And if AEW wasn't there, he would have been in. I'm sure, unless he'd messed. He'd have been in the WWE system in some way, because he's figured out whatever it is he had to figure out. But not. It's sometimes I don't know what he's had to do that. And a lot of people. We've all had time. I had that incredible run of once I turned into Lord Steven Regal. Pretty soon I was the TV champion, and I was on every single TV show, and then I was on loads of live events, and then I did hundreds and hundreds of promos. I used to, on a Wednesday, we used to go to the CNN Center with Mr. Shivani and do loads and loads of market specific promos. So I had all this kind of stuff. Well, now that just it becomes where it becomes second nature. But even from then, that's 93. I still don't think I really found me being completely comfortable till, as far as talking wise, until 96. And I was doing some what people like in 93, 94, 95. Yeah, but it takes a lot of time. But once you get really comfortable, or you're not trying to pretend to be something, and I don't mean that as a character. You have to pretend to be a character, but if you're always trying to be a tough guy when you're not one, you're not going to commit to making a fool of yourself. Right. It's just one example. I have no problem with that. I can slip on a banana peel. Because my credibility as a wrestler, I can turn it round straight away.
There's going to be. Point is you have to be self-confident in who you are.
Self-confident, yeah. But I wasn't like that as a teenager. It took me a lot of years to get there, and a lot of people helped me along. Incredible people helped me along the way. So, it's very difficult for people in this day and age to just turn up and get a few shows and be shine. So, somebody like MJF and somebody like there's a ton of people, young people now that are. But if you can get yourself noticed but don't think the work that's the thing. Then the work really starts, because you've got to stay. Once you get noticed, you've got to stay relevant. And if you stagnate, or you just get by on the same stuff, everything has a shelf life, right? Well, and so you've got to keep up with it, or be able to morph into whatever. And so that was it. So I think that's where we were up. We did the thing with Mr. McMahon. We went on to the thing with Edge. I was using the the power of the punch just come to me one day. I don't know how that came to me. It just came out again because you're just going up, and
because that's more villain stuff where you're just like, it's my power. It's
yeah,
the power of my ability to punch. Would clearly
right.
you're using.
And I remember
knuckles,
Michael
right?
Cole So I'm sorry. I remember Michael Cole interviewing me, and I just did an interview with him, and I don't shy away from the fact that I have no faith, and I hope I'm wrong, and I'm not an anti-religion person. I think it's an incredible thing. It gets you through your life. I just don't. It's not my thing. But for whatever reason, one interview, I just went, obviously I'm knocking people out with brass knuckles, but I went, it's the power of the punch. And I just looked up and I went, thanks, as if it was
right,
like
God
given
himself, right?
God
Yeah.
from God himself.
Right.
And then it became just, and that was just me
Being a villain.
me being me, just not thinking about, again, just comfortable talking and just saying something and going, oh, no, I didn't think, but now looking back thinking, I'm glad that come out because that worked. And the power of the punch, it's the power of the punch. It just came out. And because you're used to talking and you're used to just coming up with stuff, and it's if you get people who are really good at, and I've studied whoever, and I've been around whoever, and I've done it myself, and getting to perform in front of live audiences and just dealing with heckles and dealing with audience members and studying all the comedians I did when I was younger and going to watch them live and watching them doing it in Blackpool and having to deal with drunk crowds and all kinds of crowds and knowing how to. There's so many things that played into me being the way I am that I can just bounce, or just things just come out of me, and it's all worked out for me, thank goodness.
Well,
it did.
We don't really follow a strict timeline on this show, but there are some memorable moments that I want to talk about involving the power of the punch, because you didn't wear it out, because you didn't do it until people were sick of it. You could bring it back occasionally, and
yes.
you just doing my research on this. You wrestled the Big Show a lot. You wrestled the Big Show quite a few times.
I was the first person he ever met when he came to WCW.
Really?
We've been very. I used to live in an apartment upstairs in a place called Le Parc on Windy Hill Road in Marietta for the first 2 years I was in America, and I used to live before my family could come over. I lived with Barry Windham and Mike Graham, and my family were coming over. My family had come over, and I'd moved to the floor below, and I heard that there was this big lad moving into their apartment, and so I know what it's like to go to a foreign land or go anywhere and not know anybody, right? And so I heard he was coming. So my wife was cooking dinner. I heard he was young. I know I'm only 20 odd at the time, so 25 or whatever. I just walk upstairs, knock on the door. I wasn't expecting to see, telling you're going to meet a giant's one thing. Meeting him is another thing altogether, right?
I mean, you've dealt with giant haystacks. You've seen Big Daddy. You've seen a lot of men called giants.
Not
but
like him.
What did you see when you opened the door? What was your reaction when you saw that?
Well, he's a big lad, and I invited him down, and I invited him downstairs, and he came and had dinner with us, and he had, quite a, he didn't have the easiest of lives, and my house at the time, well, my apartment was full of all kinds of, which it's always going to be, but there was all kinds of lizards and stuff in my apartment, and I used to have this big, it was a blue iguana. It was a green iguana, but it was just happened to be blue. It was a very rare iguana that I'd bought when I came to America, and it was big. It was like 5.5 feet long. And I used to have it out at certain times of the day because it was really tame. And so he's just sat there, he's like huge, eating whatever my wife had cooked. And the iguana just came out and it climbed on his head. And he told me, which I felt was a bit sad, really. He said he'd never been to a zoo. I remember that really clearly. Wow. And he was like fascinated. This iguana, just because iguanas like to climb, and it just saw him, climbed up him, and he's like he obviously doesn't want to say anything, but just climbed up and sat on top of his head because they like to look, you know, they live in trees, so they like to look down on things. And he just sat there, and he doesn't want to say anything. He's just eating dinner like this. And so me and him became we were, and any day I had off, I would go to the power plant and sometimes train with him. Terry Taylor did a lot of training with him. Triple H was there, and so we all got on. But I was the first person to meet him when he came to WCW, because just like me, when I got there, they said there was somebody going to meet me at the airport, and there wasn't. And so, but I'd been there a while by then, and I wanted to just welcome him, and you know, just to say, look, if you need anything, and he ate with me. So we've known each other, and we're very good friends. So yes, I just wanted to say that story because it lets you know how long I've known.
It's a really fantastic story, but it's a great lesson because I always say with the kids I work with, I like to be the person I needed, you know, and with the Giant, with Paul White, with the Big Show, you needed somebody to do that for you a couple years before, and you said, well, here's an opportunity to be the person that I needed at one time. And you stepped up and kind of, man, that must have been invaluable to him, to be honest with you. That must have been that must have been a really good thing for him to be welcomed by somebody in the company.
Well, I'm you know, but I wouldn't think anything else. And that's not doing it for any other reason apart from me just being me. Because, again, I would never be here if there was so many of the best wrestlers ever did that for me when I was a teenager. And they didn't have to. And they all were kind enough to help me. We've mentioned so many names in the list of people, and I couldn't ask for a better group of people that did that for me. And when I've gone overseas, when I started going overseas, I remember the people who helped me. I remember, I have no ill will to the ones who didn't, but I remember those things. I always wanted to be, because I know you would not be talking to me if it wasn't for the best wrestlers in England, in Britain, taking me under their wing when I was a teenager and helping me and showing me things and leading me through and getting me booked in places and getting me booked overseas, and that led me to it. So it was just something that I wouldn't do, and we've talked about different times that's played in, you know, I would always do that in Germany. I wouldn't think twice about it. It's not for there's no agenda with it. It's just just there to help people. Yeah. Until you give me a reason not to.
You're not kidding. You know, with the Big Show, I saw a bunch of matches with you and him because I was looking up this one specific match. I finally saw it. It was a SmackDown, and what a great idea it was.
Is this the one when he fell on me?
He falls on you. You use the power of the punch. You're fine, except he falls on you. You're not knocked out or anything. You just can't get up. So you're scrambling, and the 3 count happens with you, this giant guy just on top of you. It was believable. It was funny. It was a really great idea. What do you remember about that? About coming up with it, or the reaction to it?
No, it was it was just another day at work, and we just did that, and we said, "Oh, this will be good," and we did it, and it worked perfect because he's got like Big Show, Paul White. He's got an incredible sense of timing and comedy. So we just did it, and I'm frog kicking and just like trying to get him off. There was a point near the end where he was smothering me a bit, and luckily he got off me right at the right time, because I was starting to like panic a little bit, and right in the last 5 seconds or something, like I've got to get him off quick, or somebody's got to get him off, and he was just playing dead, right? So I couldn't have got him off. He's just too big, right? So somehow we whatever, I can't remember how he got, but he got off right in the right time, because it was starting to get where I was like, with all that.
Panicky.
Yeah, and holding my breath and then doing, because I constantly frog kicking. So you're using, you're not just lying there. That if I'd have just lay there, that wouldn't have been the same. And that's that knowing.
Right.
That's that knowing how to make something out of whatever you're given is to make it more. If I'd have just lay there, you've got to, we've got to be kicking and so but I didn't think about that before I went out. As soon as we said we'd do it again, there's certain things with Pete. I trust my instincts on knowing what I did by then, and certainly did. I was lucky enough to be able to do that from in my early 20s. Trust my instincts on how to do certain things and how to get them across, and that worked. So that was one of them. Another thing, it was one of the last, I didn't wrestle a lot in the last few years of my actual wrestling career. This one from England where I wrestle him and he knocks me out. And if that is, I have seen that. And it was when I was barely hanging on. My body was not good at the time. I was wore out.
He left a lot of welts on your chest in that match too. I remember seeing that.
Yeah, well, don't, that's neither here nor there to me. You can hit me all day long. I'm like a piece of old shoe leather, you know what I mean? It's not, I've got a cauliflowered body. It's not like it's gonna be. But he did that. But the when he knocks me out at the end, that might be one of the really best knockout things in wrestling ever. Because it looks like he did it very well because he's an incredible pro. But the way he hits me and the way I go down, that looks like he's proper knocked me out. So, yeah, that was a. I think the world of him. He's a good fella, my pal.
And what a career he's had, as well.
Incredible, yeah.
And I'll tell you something else that's incredible, Mr. Regal, is Blue Chew. Someone put it on Twitter. Someone said, Matt says, here's Blue Chew, and Mr. Regal says, ooh. And the nights are getting longer. Summer's over. But the breeze isn't the only thing that's getting stiff. That's right. This episode is sponsored by Blue Chew. Guys, we all know that confidence can take you far in life. That's especially true in the bedroom, especially when it's time to step up to the plate. That's where Blue Chew comes in. Blue Chew is a unique online service that delivers the same active ingredients as Viagra and Cialis, but in chewable tablets and at a fraction of the cost. You can take them anytime, day or night, so you can plan ahead or be ready whenever an opportunity arises. The process is simple. Sign up at BlueChew.com, consult with one of their licensed medical providers, and once you're approved, you'll receive your prescription within days. The best part, it's all done online. So no visits to the doctor's office, no awkward conversations, no waiting in line at the pharmacies. Blue Chew tablets are made in the USA and prepared and shipped direct to your door in a discreet package. They say there's nothing sexier than confidence, and Blue Chew can help give you confidence where it counts. Is that something you've experienced, Mr. Regal, that confidence is important in life?
It certainly is.
I mean,
yes, it is.
Few things, and with Blue Chew, it gives you the confidence, like it says, where it counts. So if you could benefit from extra confidence when it's time to perform, chew it and do it. Have better sex.
Chew it and do it. Oh,
chew
dear.
it and do it.
Oh.
Rhyming is powerful, and we've got a special deal for our listeners. Try Blue Chew free when you use our promo code GENTLEMAN at checkout. Just pay $5 shipping. That's BlueChew.com, promo code GENTLEMAN, to receive your first month free. Visit BlueChew.com for more details and important safety information. And we thank Blue Chew for sponsoring the podcast. Now, Mr. Regal, just another couple instances I just want to talk about you using the power of the punch. You used it. So you won the Intercontinental title from Edge using the power of the punch. You lost it to Rob Van Dam at WrestleMania 18. But that same week, and this has been stricken from my memory completely, you beat Diamond Dallas Page for the European Championship with it. Do you remember? I'm sure you and Dallas had some had some experiences together in WCW. Do you remember this
Yes.
match at all, or do you remember
Yeah,
wrestling
I
him
remember it
much?
because it's the only time we ever wrestled.
Really?
Yes.
Wow, the only time.
He
That
might
that
not
that
remember this, but I remember it. When he was on his streak in WCW, beating everybody, he said to me once, "You're the one person I'm not going to be," because, and I think it was because, he was at first it was being a villain. He was trying to be a villain. He was beating everybody as a villain, right?
and then he
He said,
caught
"You're,"
fire,
and then he caught fire. Well, this
big
was
time. Yeah.
before he caught fire as a good guy. He said, "Because there's no way I can out villain you." And I went, if that saves me having to get beat by you, that's if you keep thinking that, Flower, because I was one of the few that I didn't get beat by Diamond Dallas Page, and and actually this is an interesting one of the few people because he beat a lot of people, and I beat him. I only wrestled him unless somebody else can tell me different. I only wrestled him that one match, as far as I know, and I beat him. So
Undefeated
look at that.
against Diamond Dallas Page.
But I
Undefeated.
could be wrong. I could be wrong because he do so much.
Oh
But I
yeah.
do remember that one TV match for WWE because we never wrestled in WCW. We trained a lot. And Page is another person that when I first came to America, he was injured and he was making a comeback, and he started doing he wasn't signed. He wasn't getting paid by WCW, but he come to the power plant, and I sort of he was doing. I'd show anybody if as long as you want to get in work, and he would come and work all day with me, like as long as I was in the ring, he would stay there. So me and him have always got on well. Like he would work himself to death. And I would show him things because he was going and doing independent shows, and he was asking me. And I remember him. This is like '93. Before he came back to WCW, he was asking me, can you show me some things that I can do with people who are not as experienced, like how I can sort of make do things better. So I was showing him certain things of my skill set where I can make people look like they can do things they can't do. I'll leave that there. I used to do a lot of that. I can make
That's
people
great.
look like they can do a lot of things that they can't normally do. And so but me and him trained a lot together, in that first year, 1993, and then eventually he came back to WCW and went on to do his stuff, and we didn't really, we're always friendly, but we just didn't train much after that because once you start on the road and doing whatever else, you're busy, right? So. But that 1993, any day because my family wasn't there, so any day I had off, I'd go to the power plant, and I'd spend all day there with anybody who wanted to get in the ring with me. That led to a lot of things. So
And,
yeah,
and you finally got to
Page,
face your old friend in WWE, uh,
and I beat him.
and you
Yeah,
beat him
and I
for the
beat him.
title with the
Yeah,
power of the
I
punch.
beat Diamond Dallas Page many times, WCW World Champion, and he's never beat me.
It's an undefeated record. If we
Yes.
fast forward a few years later, uh,
Everybody else has beat me. He hasn't.
well, maybe don't tell him that he's going to try to get that win back. He's
Not a
getting
chance.
a few years later, 2007, there was
Yes.
an August episode of Raw, and you became the new general manager after winning an over-the-top rope battle royal featuring other participants on the Raw roster.
I believe it was Sandman that I threw out. Was the final
What a
person.
time! What a time on the
Yeah.
roster.
And if I remember rightly, I did an old villain's trick. I took my boot off and went out the ring and stayed out the ring while they were all knocking the granny out of each other, and then just slid very connivingly under the bottom rope and hit him on the back of the head with my boot, if I remember rightly. Is that what I did? I think so.
Yeah, I believe so.
And that got me into that position. Yeah.
And this leads to you taking a month off. When you return, um, and this was a month off because John Cena attacked you for giving Randy Orton a title shot. On New Year's Eve, you came back siding with Vince McMahon. Triple H was scheduled to face Ric Flair, in which Ric Flair's win or retire thing was still going on, where it was leading to that Shawn Michaels match. You announced that if Triple H lost the match in any way, he would not participate in the Royal Rumble match at the 2008 Royal Rumble. This was to give Triple H a reason to want to win the match rather than avoid ending the career of his best friend and idol.
You're being very nice here because you said I took a month off. I got suspended for a month.
Yeah.
My name was on a list. That's another story, right? My name was on a list, and I'd done nothing that I was supposed to have not done, and didn't do any of the things that disqualified me. But my name was on a list, and I took that one on the chin as well. So, and if people have no reason to lie about these things, I'm happy. If I'd have messed up, I'd have told you. No, my name happened to show up on a list, and that I was getting all kinds of stuff delivered to me, or I'd gone on the internet and got no. And I don't deny having the stuff. I'd got it was all legal because I was of a certain age when to go to your doctor and get it, and it just happened to be coming from this instead of going to that, it was getting shipped from this place, and my name was on a list, and but it was all perfectly above board. But because of the times being the way they were, I had to take one on the chin for that as well.
Yeah, it was the optics and appearances, and
Yeah.
probably were a casualty of that.
Well, that's okay. I believe me. Anytime I got suspended in WWE, I just took it on the chin because I got away with murder a lot when I was in the 90s.
Right.
And so I just looked at it like it's just, if you want to call it karma, if you want to call it whatever.
For all the times you didn't get caught.
All the times I didn't get caught, I just took it.
And
so
this situation led to, you were being scheduled to compete against Hornswoggle that night with Mr. McMahon at ringside.
The swine. But the swine is.
He's the worst, yeah. And McMahon tossed you some brass knuckles during the match.
Oh, yes.
And encouraged you to use them on Hornswoggle, but in a rare gentleman moment of the villain, you let Hornswoggle go and left the ring. And this continued with the character that you were developing because during the Flair versus Triple H match, Triple H was about to pin Flair for the win when Mr. Regal, suddenly punched Flair in the face with the brass knuckles. This gave Ric Flair the win by disqualification, ensuring that he would continue to wrestle. So you were a big part of this lead up to Ric Flair's last match by helping him, so to speak, with the brass knuckles. What do you remember about that? Do you remember that?
I don't. You just told me about it. These stories. Again, I just think I'm me. But then, if you actually look in story form, how many? If you're watching those in order on the network, he's just playing old William Regal, but getting to be involved in storylines with all these top people, and that is obviously a major part of that storyline. They could have used anybody, and it was me. So I'm very thankful for all that. But my career is for other people to comment on and whatever else. But if I'm just little old me from a wrestling booth in Blackpool, and I'm getting to do anything with Ric Flair and Triple H and Mr. McMahon and whatever else, that job's done. Right, they were kind enough to put me in things like that, and that's all added to whatever I've been able to do and make a career out of. So thank you to all of them for even letting me do that stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you said this is for other people to comment on, and we're going to close today with a question from Twitter for people commenting on it. You can follow the Twitter of the podcast at Gentleman.
Yes, please follow please follow, because let's be honest, I don't, and I'm sure it doesn't help people that you work with in a podcast. I don't do social media much, and I'm very rarely going to. So that I have no. Everybody does the stuff for me on the follow the Gentleman Villain podcast Twitter thing and whatever else you do, because it's not going to be coming from me, and
it's
that's the
at
best way.
Gentleman Regal, and of course,
Gentleman Regal. Yes,
you can follow Real King Regal as well, because when he posts, it matters. But here's a question from Richard: have you ever misplaced a pair of brass knuckles? Maybe they've ended up somewhere they shouldn't have. Any kind of mishaps with the brass knuckles?
Well, stop me if I've told this story on here, but I know I have told this story. When I used to go on the road, at the time that I was doing that, I used to carry a pair of hard, which would knock you out just as much as the brass ones, a pair of hard rubber ones. So I could, on live events, right? Because I don't know if you know, I don't know what the term is, what the actual sentence is in America, but in England, it's 18 months. If you're caught in possession of a pair of knuckle dusters, it's 18 months instantly. Do not stop. Straight to jail for 18 months. Right? So when you see them on TV, they were always real. I always use real ones. But going on the road, when I was using them at that time, they were a pair of hard rubber ones. One day, I somehow forgot to put them in my check-on bag. And I was coming through Atlanta Airport, and I had my carry-on bags, and I mentioned this before. You don't know I'm a wrestler unless you know. And I'm always dressed decently. And I wasn't that, always in a suit and just looked like I don't know if I look like a businessman with a face like this, but I look like, any other person going through the security. My bag goes through, and for whatever reason, I hadn't put the hard rubber ones in. All the alarms go off in Atlanta. In Atlanta, and there's the security and everything's out, and it's all serious stuff like lockdown, right? And I'm thinking, oh, I wonder what's going on. I don't know, it's me. I'm just going, oh, it's kicking off here. So I'm like, what's going on? It's going to be interesting. So yeah, something's good. Well, it's my bag that gets. I'm looking. Is it yours? Yes. And now, then they start pulling in front of everybody. There's a stick. Bring them out of the bag on the end of a stick, right? And the security everywhere, and now the whole, and it is like the whole place is stopped and all looking at me. But then they start pulling out my wrestling boots and that, and I'm like, oh, I just want to crawl up my own backside and die, right? I'm just embarrassed at that.
Right.
I'm still of the reason I don't go around going, look, I'm a wrestler, because of the time I come from and the way I was brought up in this. I'm always expecting somebody to insult me because of my line of work, and I don't take kindly to that. So I found that if I don't go around flashing about that who I am, less chance of that, because I still get, I am in the only profession in the world that people think it is okay to insult me straight to my face about what I do for a living. I don't know if anybody realizes that. When you talk to a wrestler and you go, oh yeah, you'd start talking about fake and fixed and whatever else. Would you do that to anybody else in any other profession? Blatantly insult them about their line of work.
Absolutely
that
not.
feeds their family. right?
Right. 100% no.
But people think it's okay to do that to wrestlers, and it's just part of the job, and you just get on with it. But nobody would dare do that, or even think to do that to anybody else. But if they find out you're a wrestler, a load of rubbish that is. And that's the way I feed my family. I get a bit annoyed about that. So
Sure.
I've always just keep that, because again, I had this beaten into me when I was younger. I had different way of. I still haven't grown out of that. I'm protecting my line of work. So they've got the boots out, and now people are staring at me, and I'm like, oh God, just please put them on. Then one of the security guards comes over, and he went, William Regal. And he takes him off the end of this. There's one guy got him on a stick, and he takes him off, and he went, now they're hard rubber, but they still bend. And he went, in front of everybody, right? He went, oh, are these? He's going, are these the ones you knock people out with on TV? And I'm just like, oh God, please,
It's your worst
just
nightmare.
just kill me now, kill me now. Not only does he do that, he puts them on, and then he starts going to his pal, who's the one who has had him on the stick, going, hiya, doing in front of the entire stops, like the entire security and everybody that's all the passengers, like hundreds of people, and I'm
just
stood
mocking
there
you in front of everybody.
And my face is just like as purple as a baboon's chuff. You know what I mean? It's just like I'm just like, oh, and he's going, hiya, doing the big silly foot stomps that I don't do. All the wrestling things that people have seen the tricks. I don't do any of them. Right? I don't do that stuff. I've learned not. That's another thing with me. I have I don't. If there's a lot of my act was built up of what do you your thing? If you don't like wrestling, what do you think? Or you think wrestlers do that? I learned from a young age, or tried to, how not to do that. So again, it's that thing of, you can say that about whatever group of people or whatever wrestlers. You can't say that about me. It's about close-up magic, and I can be a character, I can be all over the top, but I keep my credibility as a wrestler, because I don't do blatant wrestler things. I do them differently, where you can buy into them. And it takes a lot of work. A lot of people now learn how to do illusions before they do close, or never learn to do close-up card magic, which I totally understand, because how do you get noticed? I learned very slowly. I was taught close-up card magic first, and then you can add the odd illusion. And there's no way that people have that time to do that. Well, there is a few, but now you've got to do illusions, and you've got to do to get noticed, and you've got to be good and do incredible things. Well, so he's going hiya and doing the big foot stomp and all the noises, and I'm just going, oh, for God's sake. So that stopped me carrying him on the road. Here's a trick that I'm going to give away. I still had to do it, but I wasn't going to carry him on the road, because even if they were in my check-on bag, I thought, I'm not having, that could have held my whatever happened. Yeah. If I'm thinking rightly, because it was, and it's not a nice thing to talk about, but it was right after 9/11. That's when security got really strict.
Right.
Really strict.
Changed overnight. Right.
So I thought, oh, I don't want me carry-on bags getting held up either, because you need them if you're just landing in a town and then you got to drive on to the next 4 days or whatever. I don't want me stuff holding. So I stopped carrying them. And just for anybody that saw me on live events, if you thought I was at that time when I was doing that, if you thought I was knocking people out with any, I never had anything in my hand. I used to just motion it, keep it like this, quickly hit somebody, do that again to look like I had them, and then pretend to put them back in my trunks.
Wow.
So I'm giving you one of my tricks away. So there was a point when, if you ever saw me on a live event knock anybody out with brass knuckles, I didn't have them in my hand. I didn't have any, because after that incident, I stopped carrying them. I only had them at TV because they carried them in the big trucks at TV. And so I stopped carrying them.
Now that is close-up magic.
That's close-up magic, and
Absolutely.
nobody ever once called me out on that. And I don't think even the wrestlers that I was wrestling knew that, because I
Wow.
didn't tell anybody, and I've just give that away. I just used to just, because I did it so, I had it so down, I just pulled it out, kept my hand like that, so fast with it, back to that, and put my hand in my trunks. And I never, in fact, I know I never told any of the wrestlers that I was wrestling that I hadn't hit them with them. I hadn't got a pair of them on me.
Wow. Well, that's a
That's a
great way to
good
close
way
out.
to close this.
Absolutely. Way to
So,
close this
well,
episode.
actually,
Yes,
one
sir.
little thing. If you think about that, and if you're a young wrestler, there's maybe a lot to learn from that. Learn how to do it, work, spend a lot of time on being confident and working on your skill set, because you never know when, if you're not working on your game all the time, or so much confidence, or know certain tricks that you can do to cover up things, you can probably add to your repertoire. But that really is the close-up. That's learning close-up card magic in a wrestling form.
Wow. Well, like we said, what a great way to close out the show. We'd like to thank, of course, we have Stephen Diaz today doing the video.
Thanks, Stephen.
We'd like to thank Dominic for doing the social media,
Thanks,
as well
Dominic.
as a big thank you for Derek for doing all the research up to this point.
Thanks, Derek.
And I know there's someone I'm forgetting. Wesley, who does the production. And we
Wesley?
will see you. Yeah, he's great. And we will see you next time on Gentleman Villain with Mr. William Regal.
Thank you.
That's the funniest story I've ever heard in my life.